what are the books that would be Los Angeles books that you've read and loved, and why?
Mona Simpson's Anywhere But Here.
Into the mic.
Mona Simpson's Anywhere But Here is a great book that I recommend to everyone. It's really about the feeling in some respects that I was describing in my earlier answer, which is trying to figure out stuff in your house. A lot of Los Angeles is lived. I am not a flaneur. I am not the peripatetic. I'm the brooder in the bedroom, as I've already disclosed, and and I don't drive, and I don't take to my feet. What I actually do is I wind up going to the museums of Los Angeles, which is why I wound up setting one of my novels there, because I can travel and wander in a museum in a way that is otherwise, I feel, less accessible to me in Los. I know I'm going off subject, but so Mona Simpson's book about just not really being clear, feeling really tiny in this gigantic sea of Los Angeles, and the glamour of Los Angeles, which exists somewhere in the stratosphere and that you would like to access but can't, is really a great example for me of what I'm describing.
There's a great book by a man named Johnny Otis, and some people in this room might know who that is, and I don't know how this will translate, but Johnny is a voluntary black man. He's Greek American by birth. His real name, I guess, is Johnny Vell Otis, from Oakland, California. But he was a jazz musician. Well, he still is. I guess Johnny's still around, but I think he's bad health these days. And but he essentially willingly crossed the color line to become black, and hung around with black folks and played in black bands and had black members in his band. And he married a black woman, etc. There's this great book that he wrote, kind of a memoir called Upside Your Head. And it's a kind of an oral history of Central Avenue. And that book in particular always resonated with me because my dad was of that sort of black migration that came out of this little poor-ass town in Texas called Seguin, Texas, near San Antonio. And he was part of that migration. Him and his older brother Norman came, well, first they rode the rails and they went east, and then they came west. This is during the Great Depression, or I guess the first Great Depression. This is where we seem to be in the second one. But and they eventually wound up in Los Angeles as part of that sort of black migration looking for work in the 30s. And at those days in Los Angeles was a very segregated city. And so there was a lot of black life on what they called Central Avenue, one particular thoroughfare along what would become South Central LA, or in those days it was just called East Side. And there was hotels there, and there was restaurants there, and then where black entertainers, when they came to town, they couldn't stay in the white hotels. They would stay at the Dunbar, they would stay at the Golden West, and various actors had Alex Lovejoy had a fish place on Central Avenue, and there was various jazz clubs. Anyways, and then, so Johnny's club, the Barrel House, was down in Watts. But that was just, but I always heard those stories growing up about Central Avenue. I've used some of that in my books, and so that's always been that book in particular was resonated with me a lot. And I guess I'll have to say this as somebody whose father was, in fact, a mechanic. So growing up with cars, I have to say that I guess it's not a book per se, but it's certainly, having been as a teenager, read a lot of Carcraft magazines and worked on cars and souped up cars. So that was just like for me, it was like just a normal thing to do, because we always had cars and various car parts around the house.
Well, my first encounter with Los Angeles as a place, although I had gone there as a child with my father, who worked for the Southern California Gas Company that had offices right downtown on Flower Street. My first encounter with Los Angeles as a place in my imagination was in a very well-known book by an author named Carrie McWilliams called Southern California, an Island on the Land. And McWilliams explicated it, perhaps best of any of the interpreters of L.A., the quantities of darkness and brightness, the noir and the sunshine that characterize how we talk about Los Angeles, how we mythologize Los Angeles. And I was completely compelled by Carrie McWilliams' voice, which was cool and critical and a little sardonic, and the ironies in there were well drawn. And I thought Los Angeles, which had been in my mind kind of a distant elsewhere from my home, which is all of 26 miles from downtown Los Angeles, but it seemed like another planet, really. Suddenly, Los Angeles came into focus, and I began to fall in love with it from someone who had fallen in love with it before me, and then to a degree fell out of love with it. And that was an interesting first encounter.
Listening to what Gary said, I'm tempted to say that the book would be Beneath the Underdog. You know? Charles Mingus's autobiography, which is the great jazz bass player, grew up in L.A., and his autobiography has probably about as much about the underbelly of Los Angeles as one human being could take. And in another sense, one is tempted to say that the great voice of Los Angeles may not actually be a book, but may be, the 50 years of baseball broadcasting of Vince Scully, which sounds more like Los Angeles than any book I can think of. But since it's required, I'll name L.A. as the Capital of Kansas by Richard Meltzer.
Fascinating.
Because Meltzer is he's a ex-rock writer, a professional misanthrope who is extremely proud of the fact that he has never made 5 figures in a year. And I think one of the necessary conditions for loving Los Angeles is being able to hate it with as bright a flame as Richard Meltzer seems to. And he hates the entertainment industry, he hates the music industry, he hates punk rock, he hates classical music, he hates buildings. In fact, one of his funniest books is something called The Ugliest Buildings in L.A., which is...
It's a very large book, by the way.
Man, we have some of the best domestic architecture in the world, but we have some of the worst also. And it's just, it just burns like a flame. It's a beautiful book.